So yeah, we can start our event. Thank you everyone for coming today. For those who have been riding all the way. And so that's it. I'm going to give Charlie. Charlie's going to be talking about AI and the history of AI. Yes, Charlie.
Okay, and in the past, what I was understanding this group to be was mostly beginning coders, so it sounds like some of you are already doing a whole lot of stuff in AI, so this is very much meant to be a 10,000-foot type, you know, here's things that are going on and that kind of stuff. And I've timed it, and by the way, if you want the slides, I can certainly give them to you in PDF. And one of the things about most of the presentations I do, I always have links in the slides. So even though I might have just a couple lines, the links will show you like whole articles or whole areas and so forth like that. So, and we can get as deep as you want with some of this stuff. And I left some extra time at the end to do different demos for those that may not have seen all these different tools that are out there. So anyway, okay, so large grain of salt. Whenever somebody asks me about AI and says, what do you think about AI? I show them this. Take it with a huge grain of salt. There's an awful lot of hype, and there's a lot of people that are talking about stuff that don't know what the heck they're talking about, obviously. And as far as history goes, let me just mention, and you might want to use this, wait a minute, some of the timelines, and I did have a huge, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different slides of the thing I'll show you, but I cut it down to 1 or 2 for the major ones. But I do have larger resources that show you, go in more depth in all this stuff. How does it work? List of application areas and potential applications. Before we start on AI, has anyone seen this before? A couple people? Okay. This goes back, I think, 20 years. And it refers to any kind of tech. They all follow, a lot of times they follow this curve. And you notice this chasm, that's basically where, hey, it starts up and there's some initial interest, and then all of a sudden it's like dead space, and then it starts curving up. And it goes there, it goes there, it goes there. And again, this is an adoption life cycle. And as it sits right now, I'd say we're maybe about halfway up that early majority curve. But people are still doing projects and just starting projects like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months ago. So we're still very young in this cycle. And again, as I mentioned, that link down at the bottom shows you where that link came from, where that graphic came from if you want to use it. What am I doing here? What is it? Okay. This is one of my favorite curves. Anybody recognize this one? It's from a company called Gartner, that they do all kinds of marketing research. And again, this is something that goes back years and years and years, and it applies to a whole bunch of technologies. We're partway down that peak of inflated expectations, and we're headed for the trough of disillusionment. Anybody want to guess what that means? It means people are going to say, hey, this hype doesn't work. This stuff doesn't work at all. Oh, gee, now we're disillusioned. We're not going to do any of it. We're not quite there. But it's not going to take long before it does, because there is so much hype out there where people don't know what they're doing and don't really know how to use it. They just like to use the term AI. They put AI at the end of their company name, and their stock goes up 10x. And what are they doing with it? Well, we're just doing AI. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. And finally, we get to plateau of productivity, whereas it's in general use. That could be said to an extent with ChatGPT, I would say. But anyway, I just wanted to show you this is a general pattern. And I think it's important to understand that when you're trying to do this stuff. This is a timeline, and I won't read through all of it. And I did give a reference in the next slide about where this slide came from. And I tried very hard to find a concise summary of, here's a bunch of good, a good timeline, a good summary of all the stuff that's happened, the history of it. The main thing I'll point out, though, is, and this is in general the comment I have about AI, I was in AI in the 80s. And I did AI, which at the time the buzzword was expert systems. I did that every day for 5 years. So I know the tech history of this stuff. But the point is, and as illustrated by this timeline, 1642, this stuff is not new. The theory is not new. The theory is 50 years old in a lot of cases. But we didn't have the hardware to implement the theory, and now we do, of course, with all the cloud stuff and the NVIDIAs and all that other kind of stuff. But again, the main point is to understand there's a history to this, and it's not quote unquote new stuff when it comes to theory. Any question on that? Everybody understands my point on that, right? Okay, so here. One thing that sort of I find interesting out of that timeline, again, this is just a subset of some of the stuff that was there, and every link goes to more detailed explanations of what these different points are. 1956 is when artificial intelligence, the term, was coined and gotten into general use. In 1960s, all of a sudden AI was like, oh wow, it's all over the place. This is where you found a whole bunch of science fiction novels and all that kind of stuff. And people were like, oh man, they're going to take over the world. And then we had the sci-fi movies where the robots took over and all that kind of stuff. That was in the 60s. This is before there were actually implementations of this stuff, but it was like the science fiction writers and the fiction writers just went nuts and said, oh wow, this is going to be incredible. And then they found out that it wasn't quite that easy. And so the 70s kind of curved down a little bit. 80s is called the AI winter. And again, I didn't add it on this particular slide, but I have it in the timeline. And it was a winter in the sense that it was being done a lot. And as I say, I worked at Texas Instruments at the time, and we were in military electronics. Military stuff. It was heavily in use behind walls. It was either secret, military, or proprietary business stuff. American Express was really big at that time, by the way. But you didn't hear about it. They didn't want to advertise that they were using this stuff because it was it was a competitive advantage that they had, that they just kind of hid it behind the wall. It was still going on, and there was a lot of stuff going on, but you didn't hear about it. That didn't mean it didn't exist, of course. And then we started in with deep learning, and that's, well, you could say that it started in the 60s. Really, it started taking hold in the 80s and 90s because now we had some, supercomputers and enough hardware to be able to do some of the stuff that's necessary for these neural networks and for these simulations and such. We just didn't have the hardware before, or the speeds. But when they did have the speed, type of machine learning used artificial neural networks. This is when it really started hitting, the late 80s and early 90s is when, and again, it existed before, just nobody was able to implement it on any kind of grand scale or any kind of demonstrable scale. And it was, of course, based on the human brain, and that's another thing that kind of is a mix of science fiction and some of the hype. How many of you have done neural nets? Actually run them or use them? Okay. Yeah, the model is the brain. And when you look at it and look at the conceptual stuff about this neuron talking to that neuron and all the firing and the weighting and all that kind of stuff, it all seems very logical, but it's not easy to implement at all. And it's very hard to take existing programming languages and try and adopt that model and be able to implement it. And we're still having problems with that. But the other thing that's really important recently, and this is, I say recent in the last 10 years, is the generative AI. And I'll mention what that is a little bit later in very simple terms. But it's really not all that complicated. It's just what it can turn out is really fascinating. And again, it has to do with the scale of what we can do now. We have the whole internet to suck from instead of just having little databases that we use to play with. And generative AI, it started out as just doing textual-based stuff, ChatGPT and such, but you can also do other media, such as, of course, music, videos, images, and podcasts, which, how many have played with the automatic podcast generator? Okay, I'll mention that. To me, that's one of the most fascinating things that's come out in the last couple of months. And I'll show you what that does, and it's very impressive. Yep. Okay, wait a minute. There we go, sorry. Okay, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, if you ever want to expand the acronym here, or the abbreviation. Multimodal large language models, and how many of you are familiar with the term LLM, large language models? It basically just means lots and lots and lots and lots of data. ChatGPT, Bing, Bard. I highly recommend that reference site, and I will, well, actually, I could go there now. Anybody want me to go there? I just wanted to show you that site real quick. Okay. I'm assuming the link works here. Ah, there we go. Oops. Okay. I used to multiple screens. Ah. Sorry. How do I get rid of? Can somebody help me figure out how to? I'm sorry?
Earlier when you were dragging it, it wasn't working.
Oh. Oh, it did? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay. This is one of many sites I highly recommend, ZDNet. And this is fairly new, December 13th, 2024. And they talk about all of these types, and you'll recognize some of these. ChatGPT, of course, Copilot, Anthropic, which is, I believe Claude is a Google thing now, isn't it? The what?
Google's rebranded to Gemini.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Perplexity is very interesting, and we can talk about that a little bit. Businesses and marketers, Jasper. There's some really interesting applications coming out with that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'll drag that out of the way. Okay, and then there are art tools. And besides the ChatGPT, how many of you have played around with art tools where you generate take a text and generate it? A couple people? Okay, we can do some demos of that kind of stuff. It can generate some pretty interesting stuff, and you can get very creative about how you ask it to draw things. I think my favorite example is draw a dog on the moon in a spacesuit that's a cartoon. And we can actually do that in a minute. And once again, I have a nice article here, AIR generators. And this is, let me get this real quick. Come on, thank you. Where's my cert? Here we go. And again, this is just a list of chats, of bots, or AI tools that are generative. And it's just got the list and then a link, list and a link, list and a link. And by the way, this is a site called medium.com, which is a subscription service, but it's only like $10 a month or something. I highly recommend getting it. They have some fantastic articles in there. And they have a lot of great discussion groups of people that are actually doing this stuff. So I can recommend it highly and again, it's a paid thing. They do have some free stuff, but by and large, it's worth the $10 a month to subscribe to this. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Avatar generators. I'm going to definitely demonstrate this. Have people played around with avatar generators at all? I can. Okay, that's one of my favorite examples of things that can be done that people are like, whoa. And we've got podcast generators, and the one that I'm going to demonstrate or at least show the results of is Notebook LM, which came out at the end of September from Google. And in the week after it came, or about a week after they made the big splash in beginning of October, they announced the audio overview. And it seems kind of innocuous term, but what it does is you give it documents, and it generates a podcast of two people talking about that topic, and you would not believe, I'll give you the example. Oh, by the way, do we have audio capability?
Do we have audio cable?
Do we have I didn't think about that before. Is there some way I can generate sound out of, yeah? Yeah, I know. Does it go through HDMI through the projector and then the projector goes out? Or do I have to have speakers put up on here?
I think potentially by default it might go through the HDMI cable, so you'd have to change the computer settings to change the audio out.
Okay, we'll try it in a minute, but I really want to show you the podcast generation. It's just incredible. Okay, I'm sorry. I just thought that I knew we had the projector. I didn't think about the audio there. And again, the whole idea of chatbots, and that's another link that's got best ZDNet chatbots. So how do these things work? Neural networks trained from data all over the internet, all types of media. Various hardware media sources, cameras, microphones, and so forth, so it can do it real time, and you've probably already seen this. The thing that's interesting is then you can build interfaces around the engines that you have. And some of and by the way, I didn't add another media type, and that's haptic. And that's where it gets interesting, or that is another interesting thing. Haptic meaning input, like touch, but also haptic in the sense of being able to generate objects in your hand that you can feel. And there's some of that going on now. And I don't know that I have specific examples of this, but if you're interested, I can dig out some of the stuff that I have. Okay, here's what they're not. They're not generalized AI. There's a term called generalized AI, and that says, can you have a machine that knows everything and does everything? And the answer is no, and we're not anywhere near that right now. Because every time you do it, you realize there are places where it doesn't work, and it's going to take a lot more effort. We're not a year ago. I don't know. Recently, the head of OpenAI said it's going to be 2 years from now, and I don't think that's going to happen. But the point is, it's not all-knowing, and again, it goes back to the hype cycle that I was telling you about. Make sure you use critical thought when you're looking at what people claim. Okay. And definitely they're not infallible. GIGO. Everybody know GIGO? Y'all old enough to know what GIGO is? Get garbage in, garbage out. They're not easy to use properly, and they're not your best friend. Oh no. I will mention also that when I say infallible, there's a term called hallucinations with regards to AI output. And what that means is totally false, totally made up, not true at all. And my favorite example of that is there was a court case that was done last year where there was, the lawyer got kind of lazy and he used AI to generate his entire defense. And in that defense, there were specific cases cited for that justification, right? He brought it before the judge, and the judge said, "Where did you get that?" He said, "Well, this is my defense." And he goes, "Where did you get this court case example?" And he said, "I don't remember, I did research." And he said, "I presided over that case and it was totally wrong. Tell me again where you got that generated." And he finally admitted that it was AI. He got disbarred because it was obviously wrong. The judge came it up. So that's one classic example, and I can give you the reference to it if you want. The other one that scares me is I used to work at Texas A&M Health Science Center, and using AI for medical diagnosis, you talk about liability. What happens when an AI doesn't diagnose right or doesn't come up with a proper treatment? Who's liable for that? And how are we going to handle that? And I don't think we know the answer to that, frankly. But again, use it with caution, use it with a grain of salt. Okay, so here's a very simple example of how this stuff works. And again, this is very, very simplistic, but really this is the core of how this stuff works. So when you're trying to explain this to someone that has no idea what it is, I think this is a good example to show them. Takes the prompt, meaning the question, grabs data from everywhere. Sources are tagged with metadata, and I'll mention metadata a little bit. That's how it decides where to pull its data and how it detects, how it figures out which pieces fit where. So here's the example. I start out with a sentence. The best thing about AI is its ability to, and then the generative AI goes out on the net and says, okay, find me 50,000 sentences. What's the most common next word? Oh, learn from experience, and so forth. It's not reasoning about this. It's just going out and looking at the vast array of data that it's got access to and says, how many people are going to have learn and then followed by learn from? That's at the core of how this stuff works. Now, granted, it's very simplified, and there's some other things in there. But bottom line is it's not magic. And it's not intelligence in the sense that we think of intelligent in terms of brain power. So this is my example. Now, metadata, this is extremely important. And that link, for those of you that want to get really deep in the bits, go to that link and you can see, you get a feel for how this works. When an AI goes out to find information, how does it know what to look for? Okay, it goes out, let's say you're asking it a question about cats. It goes out on the internet and says, give me all the data that's got a metadata tag of cat. And then you say, okay, what do cats eat? You find a metadata that has cat, and you have one that has feline, and you have one that says food. So the classification of data is incredibly important in the AI world. And we're not very good at it because there are billions of pieces of data out there and everybody has a different way of classifying it. This is one reason why you get these hallucinations, because somebody has misclassified it over here, does not have it the same over here, and when the AI tries to resolve it, it goes, oh, I'll just grab both of them and assume they're both the same quality. You can't make that assumption. That also is implicit in the quality of the data. Who's doing the rating? Who knows, who labeled that particular data with cat? Well, there's nobody checking to find out cat, who decides cat. So that's another reason why you have to be very careful when you're doing this stuff. You have to use critical thought. You have to have a human in the loop to interpret what's going on and make sure it works. And I won't mention it in here, but how many, has anyone used the AI stuff for coding? Copilot? A couple of you? Okay. And I've done some of that, and it's very useful at times. But there have been now studies that say that code that's turned out by AI is usually not very good. It's not efficient, and by the way, there's huge holes and examples of AI-generated code that is absolutely terrible from a cybersecurity standpoint. So if you're using this thing to generate 20,000 lines of code, you have to have a human go in and look at the 20,000 lines and figure out. So the point is, everybody's saying, oh, well, everybody will be out of a job and there won't be programming anymore. Well, that's not true. There's going to have to be critical thought and people who know enough about the stuff to be able to evaluate the stuff that comes out of these massive programs. You can't just throw them out there and assume they're going to work, or that they'll be efficient, or they will have the security built in. You can't make that assumption. Anyway, let's see, here we go. Okay, ChatGPT, most of you know that, so I'm not going to say much about that. Text classifier, though, that's that second part that I was making right there, which is someone has to classify what that piece of data is, what that text is, what that image is, what that sound is. Someone has to actually attach data to the data in order to be able to make it useful in AI systems. Chatbots. Now, I don't think I mentioned it a whole lot in here, but one of the biggest chatbot applications now is advisors, as in customer service. Customer service? Customer service. So you set up these bots with knowledge about your product, for example, and then people can come in and either with text or with voice can ask it questions, and it will come back, it'll go out and look at all the data and pull together coherent explanations or help or whatever. And some of them are pretty darn good. And I'm going to be doing a project, it's already running at Rice in the College of Business. If you go to the business school at Rice and you ask for advisors, for a graduate advisor online, you're going to get an AI chatbot that tells you about what the program is, when the deadlines are, where are the forms, how do you do it, and literally it has this conversational thing, and it's pretty darn nice. If you want to get an example of that stuff that's running right now that's publicly available, use that as an example. Rice Business School. And the engineering school wants to do the same thing. They have a non-AI version of that now, and this company I'm working with down in Houston is going to be trying to do that for the engineering school too. But anyway, here are some of the applications. Writing, that's for the ChatGPT and for the things that add on to Word and so forth and so on. Medical diagnosis, and as I say, I was at the Health Science Center and they are using it for that now with the medical students and with the actual doctors. And another thing that's generational about AI is the old guys like me, although I try to keep up, I love to keep up to date, really don't like AI and they resent it. The younger generation seems a little more open-minded about this kind of stuff. And my opinion is use AI as an assistant. Don't assume it's going to take over your job. Don't assume it's going to do everything you do, but utilize it. and Copilot, if you use Copilot right, which is that code AI stuff, if you use it right, you can do some really great stuff. Podcasts and summaries, satire. There's a great article, I'll show it to you later. Driving satire. Let's see, let me go back. Okay, demonstrations, I think I may go back, wait till the end to do this, but I will go ahead and mention this Be My Eyes. This is one example. Hold on. Where is it? There we go. This is an example of a very useful application. It's paired with your phone, and it's meant for low vision or blind people. And they can literally hold their phone up as they're walking, and it'll tell them what they're seeing in front of them. It tells them how to navigate streets. Oh, look out for that curb. Or, hey, you're approaching a traffic light. Or, hey, there's a car in front of you. And this is extremely useful. And I have some friends that are blind, and they're using this a lot. And it takes some getting used to, but this is the kind of application that we can have now. And this is one of my favorite analogies is in the pile of horseshit that's AI, there's a pony in there somewhere. Go find the ponies. They do exist. There are useful things that you can get with them, that you can do with it. Oop, this way. AI avatars. I'll show you that in a minute. I'll come back to the demos. Oop, how are you doing here? I don't know, I'm having trouble. Hold on. Come on, where are you? There we go. Why can't, sorry. Okay, here's some of the pushback, and I highly recommend looking at some of these. It goes back to my whole theme of AI being high, there's a lot of hype going on. Major techies, including Musk and Wozniak, not Bill Gates in this particular one, but there are major techies that are pushing back on this AI stuff and saying, hey, look, this isn't the be-all, end-all, and don't expect a whole lot. Don't worry, don't get bought into the hype. Make sure you use your critical thought. And my favorite response is Noam Chomsky, who is a famous linguistics guy from the 50s, who's considered to be one of the prime intellectuals over the last 50, 60 years. And he's also extremely good on the AI stuff. And he wrote a great article. And if you want to refer somebody to something that says, here's a refutation of AI, and use your critical thought, go to this article. AI isn't coming for us all, you idiots. That was done last year. Highly recommended. And one of my favorite articles is Total Crap Magazine, TCM, Chat TCM. Stephen Wolfram he's the one that invented and came out with Mathematica, which is, of course, one of the biggest mathematics tools in the last, 40 years. And he has a fantastic write-up of how ChatGPT works. And I will mention this AI tools directory, which is down here. And again, you can get this, when you get this link, you can, this presentation, you can look at these links. This is one of the best general directories that I've found online. It's very fast, it's very complete, they're constantly getting new things. I highly recommend it as a reference tool to go out and find stuff. And you'll notice that when you search, you not only have name and category, but you also have price. Is it free, is it freemium, or is it paid? And this has just about any tool you can imagine that's out there. And it's constantly being updated. I'm not sure who's maintaining this, but whoever's publishing this is doing a really good job of getting this together. So, let's see, oops. Sorry, having trouble with. There we go. And save from current slide. Okay. The other thing I'll mention is I've been on the net since 1981, and I had an email actually at ARPANET back in those days. So I've been on the net for a long time, and I'm a huge information junkie, and my mechanism of choice for collecting things is bookmarks. And there's a system called Pinboard, which is $22 a year, which lets me put all my bookmarks into the cloud. I have 25,000. But here's the thing, I can do a search. I've got them categorized, and I can find what I recorded. It's not stuck in directories all over the place. It's all in my cloud bookmarks. And you can get to that.
Is that an extension?
I'm sorry?
Is that an extension or is it an actual AI application?
It's not, no. That is, I'm sorry. Pinboard.in, uCybertruckTX is my collection of bookmarks. And TAI means the tag of AI. What have I tagged as being AI related? So if you want to look at everything that I've either gotten in or that I've found myself that I consider to be tagged as AI, there it is. And I've got, as I say, I have 25,000 bookmarks, and I don't know, probably 700 or 800 different categories. So, as I say, take it with a large grain of salt. If you have any questions, or we can go to some demos now. Any questions, any observations? Yeah, go ahead.
Who tagged all of those tags on your bookmarks? Did you tag them yourself manually, or did you have AI?
I tagged them myself, but what happened is, well, I mean, I would use like, AI or Pascal or Python, or I made them up. But the point is too, that when you go to bookmark, they have a JavaScript thing that, or you come up with a page that you have your things on, and you have your tags. And when you start typing it, it collects it. It tells you the possible responses. So if I say artificial, it will automatically fill out artificial intelligence, and I just click that. So it's fairly consistent. I don't have too many misspellings because I let it complete. If I make it up on the spot, then yeah, it doesn't have a way to do any kind of spell checking. But if once I have it in there, I can get, like I said, artificial intelligence. I'll just say ARTIF, and it'll give me that as a tag, and then I have another tag and another tag and another tag and another tag.
So
and
you are using a primitive form of generative AI, it's the auto.
Yeah, true. Well, and these bookmarking systems, they started when the cloud bookmarking stuff only started in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s. So this is before any of this new AI wave stuff came out. I'm assuming, and I haven't looked, but there are tools out there that will do have quote unquote AI on the back of them. But actually, I like kind of having the control where it's me being the human that decides whether or not that thing happens or not.
Yeah, because that's your other comment about having a human in the loop.
Yeah, about having humans in the loop. I really think that's something that's sometimes overlooked, and that's why I wanted to emphasize it over and over again here. Yes, you do have a job, and yes, you do have a purpose in this whole scheme of things. Anyway.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
That term, expert solutions.
Expert systems, yeah.
Like that's what it was. AI was considered back in the day.
Yeah.
Even today, AI is considered so many different things.
Yes.
Before that, we had Siri, Alexa, and that was considered AI.
Right.
What was expert solutions
Okay, expert systems, yeah, no. Expert systems was a generic term, which was the implementation of AI. And basically what it was is, it was basically rule-based systems. If this condition, then that. If that. It really was boiled down to decision trees, is what it did. But because it was largely based around Lisp, my favorite language, which isn't used very much, you could represent a lot of concepts. So my specific project was one called Pilot's Associate, and the idea was that there would be a backseater, which is a computer program that would be the companion to the pilot and do things that the pilot needed to have done. So we had different systems in our expert system. One of them was analyzing sensors. It had access to all the different sensors, the radars and all that other kind of stuff. And what a typical use case was that the expert would say, oh, my radar is detecting a missile coming in. Hey, pilot, you better understand that there's a missile coming in. The pilot may have seen it on the screen, but this system would be able to look at that and say, hey, guess what? There's this missile coming down. Or it also had access to all the mechanics of the plane. Oh, gee, are you leaking oil? Well, that may be out of the hundreds of things that are on the dashboard that the pilot might not be paying attention to at the time, but this guy is. And that's an example of what expert systems did. But yeah, it wasn't any particular program. It wasn't any particular vendor. It was a generic term, expert systems.
I was curious just because like things like decision tree algorithms, like things like that, when was that actually adopted into the coin term artificial intelligence? Is it even?
Well, it's also always been an underlying aspect of AI, even going back to that timeline I mentioned earlier. They may not have been called them decision trees, but it was definitely a thing of it basically boiled down to an if-then thing. If this condition exists, do such and such. Or if this condition and this condition and this condition, then that means this is the interpretation of it. So the short answer is I don't know that there was a particular timeline you could go to, or a time that you could go to and said that expert systems were considered to be AI. Again, it goes back to marketing to an extent, but as I said, it was during the 80s when there was this quote-unquote winter, and there wasn't a whole lot being said of it except in proprietary situations, military situations, or academia, and not many people were paying attention to that type of stuff. So anyway, anything else? Then we'll do some fun demos. Yes, sir?
I'm just curious about voice recognition.
Yes.
And if you see the development of voice recognition as part of the development of AI.
Oh, voice recognition happened a lot earlier than this current wave, for sure. When I was at TI, they had a thing, the generic term is natural language processing, and initially it was for text. But at TI did a lot of things to speak and spell, and that was generation, but it also did input, where you could actually recognize individual words. And that was being done in the early 80s, mid 80s, as far as the actual recognition of individual terms. What AI brings to the table is it gives you a whole other level because it can actually interpret, oh, that's this part of speech, and oh, by the way, this is what cat means. And oh, now I know that when I say cat, it can go out on the net and find out all the aspects of a cat. You don't have to go out and code it in anymore. It's out there. And you can use APIs to get to it. Does that address your question a little bit? I guess what I'm saying is that voice recognition per se has been around for decades.
Yeah, I worked with some guys who were working with a company called Nuanced, and they were doing a lot of this sort of in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Just kind of wondered how that sort of fit in.
How what happened?
How that fit in with the timeline of development of
It's in the timeline, but again, I was trying. Took me a while to put these materials together, and particularly the timeline was hard because you could find, if you say AI timeline, you'll get 50 million hits, and that one diagram that I have with all the attendant articles in it, and I know that voice was in that list. As I say, an earlier version of this presentation, I had like 3 or 4 pages of, each of these things, and I said, okay, let me just boil it down to 1 page. But yes, it was in that timeline for sure, absolutely. Although again, it's hard to say that it's AI per se. It wasn't really perceived as being AI, but it was used for user interface. And how do we do voice interfaces? And again, Siri being an example, and so forth and so on. And there were early versions of Siri in the mid '80s, or late '80s. But of course, they had massive compute power, possible problems, insanely expensive, but you could do it. And of course, now we can do it in our mouse. I mean, it's just crazy how much horsepower we have.
Can you do podcast? I've never heard about that, but that would be awesome. If
What
you can
was
do
that?
podcast.
Oh, podcast. Yes, I'll show you the podcast. Okay, let's look at the podcast. That's one of my favorite. One of my favorite things. Okay. Do it here. Okay. Notebook LM is the thing I was talking about. Now, Notebook LM is, as I say, it came out at the end of September from Google, and it had actually been around for a couple months, but they really pushed hard to announce it back in September. Okay, and when they introduced this audio overview thing, which is the podcast thing, they didn't really make a whole lot of noise on it, but some people picked up on it and realized how great it was, and it's pretty astounding. Let me get my examples here just a minute. So it's Notebook LM, and if I create new, I choose a file that I want to use for my to get the raw data to populate the podcast, the topics, okay? Let me go get that real quick. It's in here. Give me a sec. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the user interface. What you do is you go in here and you say, find me a document that I want to use. Okay? And I will, let me find my example here. I'm sorry? Any kind of file. You have a file you want to try? Okay, what I was going to do is try and find, well, we could use our examples, that's okay. All right, give me a sec. Okay, where did I find that? Hold on. I don't have this with me. Let me go to my, give me a sec. There we go. Okay. I did a save as of this entire website, Bastrop, city of Bastrop, and it just sucked all that data in. And I put it into the ChatGPT. Where did I put it? There we go. And I uploaded that web page, everything, just a straight HTML. That was the input to this system, okay? And I go back to here, and so I'm adding the source. The default is what they call a deep dive conversation. This is two people talking together about this topic, okay? And you say, generate. What? The font. Oh, yeah, sure. It's that one. Right? So you do this, get the source. Now, what I'm going to do is go in here, and I will show you. Where did I just have it? Sorry. There it is. This is the output of inputting that entire website to this system. It writes up a description, a summary of what it is. And here's the audio overview. Oh, I'm gonna let it generate the thing. While it's doing that, I did have this generated already, but let it, I'm just showing you the process. You input the source, you say generate, and then it will generate the podcast for you. That's it. Now granted, this is just the beginning. This is the stuff that's free. This is the stuff that comes out of Google. There are already a number of copycats that allow you to do things like, oh, have 4 people talk, or have a woman and a man, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. I mean, you can choose all kinds of characteristics. You can say, I only want it to be a 5-minute podcast. I want it to be a 10-minute podcast. But the quality is just unbelievable. I am sorry, I thought I'd brought it with me here.
Would you like have an interview, like kind of an interview, or is it going to be like a discussion?
It's a discussion. It's a discussion. That is correct.
The terrifying thing is that recruiters actually using tools like this to do text screens ahead of an in-person. So imagine talking to a call from AI, talking to it about their experiences to
Yes,
get a chance to interview.
exactly. Exactly. There we go. Okay, how can I hook up audio to this?
What do you do?
I want it.
Let's just say play. Let's just start.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it is here.
It's coming
it's
through the
only from
speaker.
here.
What I want to do is route
From
it
here.
through.
Is it like it's only coming from his laptop? Can we?
Oh, I can go to the projector. Is there audio off the projector or not?
I don't think the projector has any speakers built in. You could probably just disconnect the HDMI cable briefly, then it would definitely play out of your computer speakers.
Well, I'm already doing it on the computer speakers. Did you get to hear it?
I can hear it back.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Is there not?
Does anyone have a speaker? Small speaker? You know, sometimes No.
Well, I can go ahead and play it, and we'll see what we can do here.
Is it on the highest sound?
It's the highest it can get.
Okay.
Proposal for Bastrop, Texas.
Right.
You know, it's got that charming small town feel, but you can tell they're thinking big about the future.
I see. Yeah.
It's called, let me see here. It's called Bastrop City Pitch. Mm-hmm. And it's all about like infusing Bastrop with, well, they actually say it right here, innovation, fun, and excitement.
Interesting.
Hey, to help us,
Now, this is actually from a document that Ray generated, but it read the document and it generated this podcast. So let's go a little bit more on it.
unpack
It's
all
not
this.
just
You know,
reading
we have
it.
our expert in all things urban development.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So one thing that really stood out to me in this pitch was this concept of power tools.
Oh, yeah.
Like giving everyone from city hall to like everyday people these tools to boost creativity and problem solving.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
And they specifically mention AI. So I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on, AI playing a role in shaping a city like Bastrop?
It's, it is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to think of AI as something for like mega cities,
Right.
New York or something. But this proposal is saying, no, it can be just as impactful in a place like Bastrop.
Interesting.
I mean, imagine, you're a local business owner. You're trying to figure out, okay, what should I stock based on seasonal trends or whatever.
Sure.
AI could come in, analyze data from past sales, from social media, even like weather patterns.
Wow.
And give you these hyper local insights.
So it's almost like having like a super powered advisor like right on your phone.
Exactly, yeah.
That's pretty cool. But how does all this fit into, Bastrop's overall vision for itself?
Well, if you look at their mission statement,
Okay, none of that was in the document. Weather was not mentioned. Anything. This whole conversation was generated in about 5 minutes from that source document that was about 2 pages.
Having said these as substantive, I want to, like, can you play it? I want to hear just mention something.
Can we keep playing it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned anything relevant about that stuff.
Okay.
Can you bring your laptop closer, maybe?
No, I see here. Just keep
Give the people in back.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought, well, I didn't realize I didn't think about the audio part.
No, you can keep playing there. I just wanted to keep listening to see if you mentioned something about Bastrop.
Okay, sure.
we talk about innovative and proactive services to enhance their, quote, authentic way of life.
Okay.
So it's clear they're not trying to become like the next Silicon Valley, but they're open to using technology in a way that enhances what makes Bastrop.
Got it. So it's not about erasing their identity, but evolving it. Now, they could want to talk about all these strategies to like supercharge Bastrop's growth, attracting businesses, talent, revitalizing existing businesses,
Right.
offering like soft skills programs.
Right.
So, what kind of impact do you see these strategies having on, let's say, like Bastrop?
Well, I think they're smart. They're layered approaches, attracting talent and new businesses. That's like bringing in fresh ingredients, right?
Okay.
Revitalizing existing businesses is about like perfecting those recipes you already have and those soft skills programs. Those are like your culinary, making sure residents have the skills to thrive in this, constantly evolving context.
I like that analogy a lot. It really highlights how these different strategies kind of work together
Exactly.
to create something richer and more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Now, something else that caught my eye was
So this what is exactly it for Bastrop?
Really want to
I'm sorry? This is pitching to the city of Bastrop. Is a document that was produced. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. My company focuses on creativity and innovation. And I figured with Elon Musk in Bastrop, that might be a prime opportunity to work with not just the city, but the chamber and the businesses. I mean, he's got what is it, Starlink, is it?
Yeah.
Starlink, he's
Yeah.
got the Boring Company there, and now he's going to have the headquarters, believe it or not, of X in Bastrop. So what Charlie did, and this is absolutely amazing. So I took a marketing piece that I was going to send to Bastrop, and it was a Word document. And I gave it to Charlie, and what it produced was far beyond my expectations. It did not use word for word. It came up with brand new generative text that astounded me. And it was done in 5 minutes. Is anybody here in marketing, sales, advertising, PR? These things are gold. These things, they can change your world. And the voices are so natural, it's absolutely unbelievable.
Can you choose the voices?
Yes.
Not in this tool, but there are others that are there.
Yes.
There's some out there that can.
But the good thing about the voices is they're so realistic. Right away, you don't think that they're artificial. It's that good.
So was there anything about the default that made you pick up to humans talking?
I'm sorry, sir?
Was there anything about the end product that made you think around this is not a recording of two humans?
Well, Charlie kind of stoked my curiosity. You're going to be pretty amazed when you see this thing. And you know, I take some of those suggestions as a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But when I heard it 5 minutes later, I said, what the hell is this magic? This is crazy. So when I heard it, it sounded so natural. You want natural. You don't want, artificial voices that, even if they're 5% artificial, we can tell. And it wasn't. It was absolutely astounding. So whatever business you're in, this application is really gold. It can help you out dramatically. Any questions?
My answer to you is, if you do a lot of these, and I've generated probably 10 or so of these and have spread it out to other people, you notice patterns. You notice certain phrases that they use, or they use some language that they use, or various concepts. They kind of have a common thread. But again, that's just this one tool. And this is the initial free one. The stuff behind, when you're going to be paying for doing this, and it's cost, $1,000 to generate 5 minutes, yeah, you're going to be able to, it's going to be hard to tell that it's AI.
It was like human-like, and it was like web check documents, all this human-like gestures of their voice.
But the other thing is, it goes back to my central point that I made early. You've got to have critical thought here. If you just listen to that and you only pay attention to the fact that it's a natural voice, and you don't pay attention to the fact that they're, uttering utter garbage. If you don't pay attention to that, yeah, you better be careful. Don't assume, like that lawyer that got disbarred. Don't assume it's accurate.
Can you get it to put the sound of a train in the background?
Did I what?
Can you get it to put the sound of a train going past in the background noise?
I didn't. Why? Oh, you mean for them? In that? No, I didn't hear it. Oh, it was an airplane. Yeah. Actually, I didn't. Yeah.
So you talk about taking things with a grain of salt and garbage in, garbage
Yeah.
out, and stuff like that. The main issue that I have with AI when I try and use AI is I have big trust issues. So there's the trust issue of what are they doing with my data? Are they really good?
Oh, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
also the trust issues of how can I actually trust that even if I give it what I consider to be quality input,
Yeah.
I'm actually going to get quality output, because I've had too many instances where I've gotten into fights with my family because of what AI has generated.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You raise a really good point, and I've got to add that to some of my other materials that I'm going to be doing. You're absolutely correct. There's an issue of trust. There's an issue of reliability. Yes, that's a very good point. Absolutely.
What's happening with that?
The short answer, if you want it really look at cutting edge of trying to deal with that kind of issue, particularly reliability and trust, go look at the EU. The EU has privacy policies that are in place now throughout the EU that address this stuff directly, and they discuss exactly what you're talking about.
There's privacy stuff that I think is completely separate from.
Mm-hmm.
But like, so what I have is the garbage out stuff. Yeah.
Oh, believe me, I understand.
Short of actually going through the content that's generated,
It's
how
not.
can you really trust whether or not it's
The short answer is there's no way to go through all the output. The question is, can you come up with what you call a reliable source? What's the definition of a reliable source? Case in point, I consider IEEE to be a worldwide organization that I can trust that source technically, period. There may be some garbage in there too, but by God, if it gets in IEEE and they put their name on it, I trust their reputation as being a reliable source. Do those sources exist? Not on any great scale, but they do exist. I'm using IEEE as an example.
as an example
Of a reliable source of technical information. If I get a piece of technical information and I see it in IEEE, I have a very high confidence that that is accurate and technical and it's been vetted.
someone else has reviewed as the source, but like when you get some content that you suspect might be AI generated,
Yes.
or that you know that is AI generated, how do you know? You can, and you trust that it's been fed and reliable information. How can you trust that the output is actually reliable and accurate?
And it's different sides of the same pipe. You're talking about the output. I'm saying that when output is there, where can I go that I can look at the output and know that I don't have to, I can trust the fact that that's out there. Let me take another slant on that. Particularly in the last year and a half, there's been tremendous concern amongst teachers, K-12 or universities or whatever, about getting materials that are stolen, right? That people have just copied. There are AI systems, and OpenAI has one of these, where you can give it all of the output that you have and throw it through that, and it'll say, oh yes, that's AI generated, or it's not. Now, is it very good? No, it's probably it's not great, but it's a step in the right direction. There are tools being built that will try to detect if a piece of data or a piece of output is generated by AI. And they have been able to determine that, and they're actually using it in schools, even here in Houston. There are schools that are using those tools to try and analyze what the students turn in, and if the system turns up with stuff that the system says might be plagiarized, the students are called in and they have to explain their writing.
I think you're talking about a slightly different situation. I'm talking about where 100%, like I've generated it stuff myself. It's not a question of whether or not it generated it based on AI.
Okay.
It's not a question of, is the source material accurate? This question is, I fed it these multiple documents.
Yes.
And I've asked for an output from it. And I've had too many experiences in my past where I looked at the output and then I went back and I verified it by comparing the output from
Yes.
AI to all the source that I fed it to. And there was enough stuff that was wrong that I just did not trust the output, and I ended up throwing out all the output and starting over and doing the task without AI.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because I have to use it pretty regularly in my job. I work in media, so we have like copywriting. We have to come up with a lot of stuff. We use that as a resource. And you'll notice that it definitely comes out wrong at times. And one time I got spoiled and we were reading a book, and it was for my job, and our boss wanted us to read these certain chapters before staffing. And I didn't read it the night one. There was one chapter I didn't read it the night before. I was like, oh man, I was like this. So I read it. I asked ChatGPT. I was like, do you know about this book? And it said, yes. I was like, can you tell me about this chapter? And just for safekeeping, I just proofread, I just quickly read through that chapter. It was nothing, well, it's not nothing.
Wow.
It's a completely different thing, but I've noticed that you have to ask like very small questions, you know, like for small content output, because if that makes sense. Because if you ask it for something a lot bigger, then it's going to give you something that, you know, is not right. I don't know. I feel like so the output that I got when I was talking about that chapter, it was it's like at first it was doing good, but then it started like almost, I don't know if this sounds right, but almost like having a conversation with its own self, like just saying things that make sense. Does that make sense? Like the topic that it made sense to itself, it was just doing that. But when you read the book, it was definitely doing that. I don't know if that makes sense. But
I think it's like, oh, I was like, the next fast outcome, and by the time we made that, it doesn't. It predicts like a fast one, and that might not be true at all. So, I mean, I found at least for like bad, prompting,
Yeah.
telling it if you don't know, if you think it's not correct, don't make something up, and that helps. I don't know how much that helps in like actually like conversing with it, like ChatGPT wise, but I think that's a big part of the issue.
That's like the first level of control, right? You're a prompt engineer. You're defining rules for the system as you
Mhm.
put out, it's a rules engine.
Right, right.
I'm going to read through the instructions and think about it like you're having a conversation with another person and you want to lay out, here are the ground rules for the content that I want you to generate. Here's guardrails for, hey, don't put information that allows the person to self-harm, or like don't tell them to go jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
Like, you're having to lay out rotely instructions for the system. Otherwise, all it is doing, to your point, is evaluating a function and saying, how close can I get the output to 1 instead of 0? That's it. Like it's probability on the next token generated, and does that fall in line with the expected result?
OpenAI has like, I think 10 pages of information, just prompt engineering. And it's,
Yes.
The root is like,
Yes.
if it doesn't know what you want, it can't give you what you want. And so the more specific you can be, the better.
You can also go too far though. If your prompt is too detailed, a monumental, like a
Right.
giant prompt, you increase the likelihood of hallucination because it is actually contradicting itself while it's reading through the instructions. But I would say like that's your first level is prompt engineering. Then you get into retrieval augmented generation, which is your idea of saying,
Yeah.
let's fold in the stuff that is proprietary knowledge for that company or for you, the person. This is stuff I want to fold into the memory of the context of the LLM. And if you do that right, then you have a RAG system that is kind of upping the accuracy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then like next level below that, you have to go do hyperparameter tuning for the model, and then I'm going to take the foundational model and I'm going to train a version
Yep.
that is that I've adjusted the weights for the engineering features that trained that model. And that's where you get into like your highest cost that nobody like wants to do on their own, because how many of us have a data center in the house, right?
What is fine-tuning? Is that bad?
So fine-tuning is a layer below RAG where you are changing hyperparameters. So these are the parameters that are exposed by that particular model. This is things like temperature, top K, top P, and there's a few other ones that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Different models accept different parameters. And that's like, here's the interface that the developer gave you to kind of tweak it a little bit. Going below that is where you have to go in and actually retrain a model with a new data set or folding in an additional label. So that gets really expensive really quick. But the first thing I'll tell you is like, be very concise in your prompts and be very like blunt. Like, don't do this, do this. This is an example of what
I've tried doing that, and either I really suck at writing prompts,
Yeah.
or I'm too much of a programmer that
Oh,
I think this makes
yeah.
complete logical sense.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking it to do something enough out of the ordinary that it just kind of doesn't know how to actually
It gets
follow
con-
instructions because it's not following logical instructions.
The different models actually have different reasoning systems underneath. There's like chain of thought and a few other ones out there that you kind of have to adjust how you write a prompt for. So that's why like Anthropic's Claude has a really good guide. OpenAI has, as they pointed out. I like to think is a job title for the next coming years is probably going to just be prompt engineer.
Oh, it already is. Yeah.
So.
I mean, I don't know how simple you can say, here's list A, here's list B. Give me a list of all the duplicates.
Sometimes it helps to provide concrete examples within a system prompt that you're actually saying like, this is an expected result. Try to match this pattern when you're generating your output. That can sometimes help, but it's an art. It really is like you're having to try trial and error. What works for this system, what works for this use case, may not work for a different model or a different use case.
True.
Do you have any more questions to Charlie?
Thank you. I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a big open-ended question. So you talked about the past and history.
Yes.
What do you think about the future? Are we getting disillusioned according to the...
No, not really. Even though I said take it with a grain of salt, there are a lot of people that are going to be put out of work because there's, writing tasks or things like doing translations and that sort of thing. There's some classes of jobs that are going to go away, but we are going to get back. We are going to get to the point where we're going to get more and more intelligent about, or the systems are going to get more and more intelligent about how they do things and the outputs they have. One of the problems I have, which I didn't bring up at all, is how does the society handle it? How does the legal system handle it? And how do the political systems handle it? And they don't have a clue. They are totally out to lunch. And as I say, I think the EU is the best example of somebody who's trying to get a handle on this stuff and trying to actually define terms and be able to discuss these issues. Short answer is, I think, yes, the tech is going to get better. We need to make sure that the people are set up to be able to handle this. And a lot of people are just going to give up and say, what the heck for? I'm competing with a computer, so why should I even bother? It also goes back to education. I've been in education for many years, and seems like we have a harder and harder time teaching critical thought. And we've got to figure out how to solve that. If we don't prepare the humans to be able to figure out what the tech is going to be doing, A, the tech is going to be doing a lot more, and B, the handful of people that do know what's going on and are actually controlling are going to be the ones at the top, and everybody else is going to be down here. So there's a societal question built into your question, I think, or was that meant to be? You said open-ended. Okay. Tech's going to get better. People, I hope, are going to get more critical and know and look and see what the heck's being turned out, and don't take it for granted that what the AI says is right.
I personally think, just from the discussion, I think there should be a new job created that selects which situations to use generative AI.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I don't know of any such, but that's a very good idea, actually. Yeah.
So going back to the idea of an AI system only being as good as the training it's had.
Yeah.
What do you see going on as far as transparency, which enables people using an AI system to understand how it's been trained, what material it's been trained?
Partial answer, and this is getting down the bits a little bit and kind of touching on what you were talking about. That question came up with the expert system stuff in the 80s. How do we know that this stuff is reliable? And the answer is we had to build mechanisms that would show you how it made its decisions. Where are the decision points? And then be able to examine those decision points and say, oh, was that decision questionable? And if so, what's wrong with this decision point?
So that's like listing the business rules.
Correct.
But how do you know what material it's actually been trained on to develop those business
If you have transparency on the process where you can ask the system, and that's what RAG does to an extent, right? Is my understanding.
Well, it's a system trace effectively that you can run in many of these systems.
And that's right. Basically, you're asking the system, how did you come to that answer? And it will tell you, I got these pieces of information, and then you can evaluate whether that was done. So part of the thing is, I guess you'd say it's accountability. It's not, we're trying to figure out how to make it so it's not a black box. Does that address your question?
Yeah, that's what we're worried about. Is,
that's exactly what we're worried about. Where is it getting this information, and how do I do it? How did that lawyer get that piece of information? He didn't ask. He didn't ask the AI. The AI got it from somewhere. Well, guess what? AI is reading science fiction books now. How is it able to know that the source was a science fiction book versus real life? If there isn't metadata out there that somebody qualified it, we don't know. We've got to get more, as you're pointing out, we got to get more transparent about having a way of asking the system, where did you get this information? And oh, by the way, we can go back and find that initial place where it was generated and go back to the source. But if we don't know where that was, what do we do, right? Anyway.
Not only is it a question of can we actually go back to the source,
Mm-hmm.
is anyone actually even checking?
And that's part of that's implicit in the answer. Yes, you're right. Nobody's checking. Nobody's checking. Who is the group or whatever that does the evaluation, and how do we identify it, and how do we hold them accountable?
I think there's a mechanism like where you can report a certain answer to where it's not true, and maybe that helps the.
Who does that?
There's doing the who actually checks the reports, the reported answers.
Mm-hmm.
The user would have to report them, right?
Yeah. So it's
and are they actually going to do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let me back up. So, sort of along what you were saying. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've heard that, I don't know how true this is, but at least like OpenAI can use models that they've already trained with certain guardrails to basically review answers to make sure it's within their community guidelines. And so
yes.
You have that model once that.
Who built those guardrails, and what are they?
Well, I mean, who defines guardrails?
Well, that's what we're saying.
Without transparency, you have no way.
Without transparency, you don't know who set those guardrails. You don't know who said that this thing is false.
And devil's advocate when
it's a devil's advocate
have
thing.
Their own best interest in what they're exposing.
So your question really comes around to how do you define trust?
Correct. That's good. That's a very good summary. Yes, absolutely. How do you define trust? How do you
Honor among thieves?
honor among thieves, or well, let's use Wikipedia as an example.
I think it depends on the user. So how much trust the user places in the tool that he or she uses, and how much risk the user is exposed to by the answer. I think the user needs to be discerning because you cannot trust 100% everything that comes out of it.
And that goes back
to be choosy as to what you want to get out of AI.
Agreed. It goes back to the issue again of, well, as you say, who do you trust? Let me go back to effect on the user. If it's only one user, if I've got a whole hospital of patients and I'm only using AI on 5 of them, I don't worry about the other 90 out of 100. If I do the 5 and one of them is wrong, whoops. It has to do with the size of the audience too. But let me go back to another thing. If we have transparency of a sort, as in what you were saying with the OpenAI stuff, let's say they published the guidelines that they did for the setting the guardrails, right? Could I come in as a volunteer and look at those guardrails and start messing around with them and tweaking them? If we could get 2 million people to go and look at the guardrails, guess what? They'd be a lot better. That's another reason why I like open source, by the way, is because you can have millions of people look at it. But at any rate, you follow where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think the guardrails are more about like the community, like what is allowed to be spoken about, right?
Who is doing the allowing? That's the accountability.
Like what are their content guidelines?
The content guidelines.
Yes.
Have they publicly disclosed, like, this is the content we want to avoid, this is the patterns that we're looking for within content to decide if it's against guidelines? So,
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that those things exist, but I don't know how, I haven't looked at the guidelines myself. I will say that I like your idea of the new job title. Kind of goes along the same lines.
Copyright it, put an NDA on it.
Go for it. Go for it.
One of
Yeah.
my friends works at a company, a very large company, and she says that this very, very large company has just categorically said that everyone in her department is not allowed to do anything with AI.
Oh, wow. Really?
Like, not allowed.
Wow.
I work for a law firm and they send a firm-wide email saying that you cannot use AI and you cannot upload any documents.
Wow.
It's a real easy way to exfiltrate data. I mean, you're giving data, especially if you're using a third-party vendor, you don't know what ChatGPT is going to do with the prompts that you're
Yes. Yes.
They're going to say, oh, we're monitoring this activity in the terms of service so that we can improve our offering. But congrats, now your details about some intellectual property that you had is now within that training set for that model.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting idea, because that takes you towards having your own private AI system.
Yeah.
When you're not relying on a public AI system, you don't know how it's been trained. You're relying on your own internal ring-fence AI system that's only trained on your own content, which presumably you've got a high trust level with.
And as long as you have a limited application, you can do that. But the more you restrict it, the less you can get the benefits of what's all out there, too. So
Systems like that are already kind of prevalent. OLAM is an ability to run open source models. You can either point it to a third-party API to say, like, hey, call ChatGPT for me with my key, or let me run this locally. And with models that are small enough and with sufficient hardware, you can actually create pretty decent results. It's just slower, right?
Right.
And if you're using too large of a model, you're going to just cook the video card that you're using.
Right. I know one guy who owns a company that does a lot of software development. They use AI to help them write code, but their AI model is only trained on their own code, which kind of requires you to have a whole lot of code to start off with. So, particularly me.
if it's used carefully, the AI stuff can be very useful as an assistant. And that I had an argument with a friend of mine who teaches art. And he got in an argument with the professor that said, we're not going to allow any of our students to be able to use any AI for any kind of art, period. In the case of, I guess it was a drawing class or something like that. And my friend said, well, okay, you can do that, or you can do what I'm doing, which is I tell my students about it and I say, look, use it to do the initial thing, initial drawing. And at a certain point, you've got to add your own pieces into it and show me that you can do that. His classes were so much better because they had so many people that were using that to generate the initial stuff. And this group was doing it completely out of their heads. And, you know, I don't like that that's the case, but it is the case. You're able to be more productive if you use the extra tools. It's like, there are friends that I knew that, you know what a slide rule is? How many people know what a slide rule is? Okay, just a few people.
Calculator.
No, I'm fine, but I'm just saying that I went through the trouble when I was real young of learning how to use a slide rule, and then the calculator came around and I went throughout the slide rule. Okay, not using AI is using the slide rule. Sorry, that's just the way it is.
Except I trust my calculator a lot more than I trust AI.
Oh, no argument there. No argument whatsoever on that one. No argument whatsoever. Anyway, you know what? I think we ought to have a separate group to do nothing but debate these things. Yeah. I'm sorry, my presentation kind of went out to lunch, but it's generated this discussion, so I'm happy for it. I'm happy personally.
I really like your persistence with your question.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, thank you.
That push this progress forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I thank you too.
I
Appreciate it.
used to be kind of, I've just been burned by AI. And was
Yeah.
That's actually kind of funny is one of the no-code tools that I use is Coda. They made a big announcement that they were acquired by Grammarly.
Oh, wow.
And I realized Grammarly is the one form of AI
Yeah.
that I've never been like wow, I hate this, get this off of my system.
Except now they're just charging more.
But the thing about it is, it's like, well, Grammarly is the one AI where I don't, on a regular basis, just roll my eyes at what it's created.
That's a good point. By the way, a trivia question. You know where Grammarly's based? Ukraine. And they still operate out of Ukraine. They still have facilities in Ukraine, which is sort of interesting. Anyway. Yeah, I agree with you that Grammarly is that's what I was saying about the pony. That's an example of a pony in the pile of AI. Anyway, something that actually does work and is actually useful. And yeah, I agree with you. I like Grammarly.
And it's big and slow and ugly and kludgy.
Yeah, but it works. And you can trust it, right? For the most part.
It mostly works.
Yeah.
And I mostly can see why it made the suggestions, and 95% of the time I say I don't want that suggestion anyway.
Okay, well, that's fine. Sure. Sure.
But what also I really like about it is it's small. I don't have to write a prompt for it.
That's true.
And I can evaluate it and whether I want to use it really fast.
That's true. That's true. Well, that might be part of the solution, or the answer to your question. Come up with tools that actually work, tiny tools that actually work, as opposed to having these massive systems that are supposed to be doing everything.
Yeah, isn't that what you're saying, Sly? Like a lot of it's AI is not intelligent. It's like expert on certain topics. So each AI is used for this criteria.
Yeah, yeah. There is specialization now, and it goes back to what he was saying.
Agent that can utilize different tools. So
Correct.
There's a new notion of multi-agent solutions where you have
Yes.
a supervisor and workers.
Yes.
And the workers might say, this worker only knows how to write to an API or understand a response from an API. Because you're kind of putting horse blinders on that specific worker, it's able to focus more and do just that. If you give it too much, then it's kind of loses focus if you want to think about it like that. So
Well, that's...
you can modularize it and put it into smaller
I want to look at the ones you're talking about, because one of the things that did happen on the expert systems is they had the idea of expert, and then they would all talk to each other, and then there was a global thing that would coordinate what all the experts do.
A couple different approaches to it that are expansions upon like the agentic RAG. Now there's multi-model agentic RAG and a couple other, like everybody's trying to do their own take on these systems. And I don't think any clear kind of winner is one out. A lot of times when I've used systems like that, I get slower and worse responses at times. And sometimes it's just better to use like a single model and focus on that.
Okay, what were we going to say?
I was just going to ask, how can we get a copy of your slide deck?
Oh, that's easy. I can.
You can send it to me.
Can I send it to her and we'll get it up?
Attendees
Oh,
of today's meetup. Are you in the meetup group?
Sorry?
Are you in the meetup group?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you are in the meetup group, you're going to receive the slideshow.
And if you play around in my cloud bookmarks, let me know. It's kind of fun. You can there's a lot of rabbit holes, but it's fun. And then, like I said, I can usually find the stuff that I'm looking for, which is unusual these days. So.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
From our time, so you can have your conversation. I'm not sure about that, but we have about like 5 minutes, right, guys? We're here from 7 to 9. Yes, I want to be yeah. So.
And thank
you. Have a great holiday. Thanks for coming.
And thanks to
for Wes.
yeah. Were you the host?
Yeah.
Thank you. thank you for being the host, and thanks for the tacos.
Of course.
Good, awesome,
Pleasure.
excellent. Okay, thank you.
Or you
Okay.
can